Hello, everyone. Hi. Hello. So nice to see you all here. I'm glad Amity brought my glasses to the attention of everyone. As you can see, they do get little hearts when you make me blush. And little teardrops when you make me sad. And they get quite angry when you make me mad. But you have yet to make me mad, chat. Hi, Amity. Hello. Hello, Shade. Hello, Psycho. Hello, Fred. So nice to have you all here tonight. It seems like we're in for a delightful night of Fright. Perfect. Now you must anger me. You know, some people have been trying. But thus far, I think I'm surviving very well. I can say I'm genuinely excited to be back with more scary stories. I kind of wish I was doing more scary stories this week, and I might. Hello, Psycho cooking, so late response. Hello, everyone. Oh, someone's cooking. What was I saying? Oh yes, there might be a gorilla stream. It depends how exhausted I am from my work as a background actor, as I have spoken of. Yeah, totally, that's what I do. That's how I make my money aside from this, and I'd like to quit it. That Psycho. Oh, you'll make me blush. I'm such a sucker for compliments on my appearance. As you can guess, being invisible, I don't get too many. Fantastic. How's everyone doing tonight? Everyone ready to be scared? As you know, my horror reading streams are not at all incredibly relaxing tales for you to fall asleep to. They are deeply terrifying, unsettling stories that keep you up at night. Oh, most people talked about it as bedtime stories last time. Oh, you cad. I know you talk about that way to all the Yokast members. Hello, Grimwolf. So glad to have you here as well. Hello. I'm sorry to hear about a root canal fiasco. That sounds rough. Those are always so brutal. You can only imagine how hard it is for dentistry to be done on invisible teeth. Yeah, it's a lot of guesswork. But weirdly enough, x-rays do still work on me. I guess that makes sense, but still feels weird to be seen in any regard. Well, I'm glad everyone is mostly having a good day today. Aside from that, I think perhaps perhaps we should head out to the backyard. To my cabin in the woods. Let's go. It'll be a quick walk, I assure you. Wasn't that fast? Look, we're already here, and I have this book to contain your writings while I talk. Somehow it works better than my monitors. Don't know why. Maybe I should bring this magic book into the studio with me, eh? If I wore colored contacts and makeup. Yes, I've considered wearing it for stream, but I don't know. I like how I look au natural. Oh yes, I'm quite the sprinter. You have to be. And it looks like we have the delightful watchers in the distance to observe our evening. Space works quite strangely in the Yokast mansion. Sometimes a mere walk to the kitchen is hours away, and sometimes you're in the backyard in mere seconds. It's hard to quite explain. I don't quite understand it myself. Some hallways seem to go on forever. Did you guys see the trailer? That one hallway just keeps going and going and going, and then it leads out the front door, even though that doesn't really make sense. Essentially, yes. I went upstairs. I was going to tease Amity a little bit. Yes, the rules for monsters are quite different than those of man. I'm sure the other monsters in chat know, though. Ooh, that would explain the mail. That would explain the mail. But somehow Sianna got her package recently. Not sure how that happened. It's the only package we've received in forever. Have they told you what they got yet? Has anyone been in Sianna's streams to listen? I'm very curious. I want to talk about it, but it's their right to tell. Yes, otherwise Romeo's degree, which he keeps saying is in the mail, would be long lost. Well, if they haven't told you, then I won't say anything. That's for them to say. Now, I haven't actually announced the stories we're telling tonight, have I? It's not in the description. It's a secret. I actually was very excited for these two. The first tale of this evening is a quite well-known one. Oh, hi, Toxic. I hope you stick around. Or an owl from that school. Yeah, what school is that? What non-copyrighted school is that? Did you pass on my kind regards to everyone else? I really do miss them. I know we don't stream at the optimal times for everyone, but we miss you guys. Yes, pig moles. That makes sense. I think that was it. Anyways. The first tale of this evening will be none other than the Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. One well known to many, possibly more known through retellings than it is through its original. It's been referenced in media countless times. God, I think I first learned about it, like many learned about most popular culture via The Simpsons. Brilliant episode. I'd love to do a Simpsons watch along someday, but I guess that'd probably be boring for a lot of people. I love that show. It's I couldn't. This is a scary story stream, not a talking about The Simpsons stream. Only the old seasons, though, not the new ones. Like up till 10. Really, is where it was good. And like season 1 is, oh my god, I'm doing it already. Anyway, I'm totally ruining the atmosphere. Well, without further ado, they do have more, oh god, I'm doing it again. They do have more than 10 seasons. They have like 30, almost 40 now. But the original 10 seasons, the first 10, 1 to 10 of The Simpsons, were the best seasons, hands down. It had the original show running team. It also had some of the most brilliant writers, including Conan O'Brien. And yes, it was when the jokes were good. Not that they're not all bad now, no offense to it. It just hit different for me personally back then. Now, just the eyebrow raise. Once again, I say, without further ado, the tale of the Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. True, nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing, acute. I heard all things in the heaven and earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain. But once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me, he had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was all his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture. A pale blue with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during that... I was never kinder to that old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it. Oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern and closed. Dark lantern, all closed. Closed that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray of light fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight. But I found the eye was always closed. And so, it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. So, you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed, to suspect that every night at 12, I looked upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. Now, you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with thick darkness, for the shutters were closed, fastened, though through fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door. I kept pushing it on, steadily. Steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern, when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour, I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime, I did not hear him lie down. He was sitting up in the bed, listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not the groan of pain or of grief. Oh no, it was the low, stifled sound that arrives from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew that sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise, when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing, merely a cricket. But the wind in the chimney, or a mouse upon the floor. Or it is merely a cricket, which has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found it all in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him, and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he never saw nor heard, but to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very little, crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a simple dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice and fell upon the vultured eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow of my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon that damned spot. And have I not told you, what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the sense. Now, I say there came to my ears a low, dull sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet, I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, so I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet, for some minute longer, I refrained and stood still. The beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the door. I threw open the lantern and leaped into the man's room. He shrieked once, only once. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me, for it would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for concealment of the body. The night waned. I worked hastily but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head, the arms, the legs. I then took 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot, whatever. I had been too wary for that. The tub had caught it all. When I made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by the neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play. Sorry, had to cough there. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play has been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them, at length, to his chamber, I showed them his treasures secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which I disposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily and chatted of familiar things, but ere I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My heart ached. I fancied a ringing in my ears, but they sat still and chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued, became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definiteness until at length I found that noise was not within my ears. No doubt, now I grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such as the sound a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the sound steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key with violent gestures, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair which I had been sitting upon and grated it upon the boards, but the noise arose all over and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, they heard. They suspected, they knew, and they were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think, but anything was better than this agony, anything more tolerable than this derision. I could hear those hypotheticals. I could bear those hypothetical smiles no longer. I felt I must scream or die. And now, again, hark louder, louder, louder! Villains! I shrieked, dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks here, here. It is the beating of his hideous heart. And that was the tale of the Telltale Heart. I really got into that one. I hope you guys enjoyed. That was fun. That was a good one. That was a good one. I'm glad you all enjoyed. Water break. That was quite stressful on the throat, but worth it, I think. I hope. That I enjoyed that one quite a bit. I was kind of worried about it because it was different than I expected it the first time I read it. I'm glad you all enjoyed. Had to make some defined choices. That was our first tale of the evening. I'm glad that was good for y'all. My apologies. My calm storytelling vibes kind of disappeared with that one. Consider that you get to watch me grow. As I find what kind of storyteller I want to be. Oh good, I'm glad I've reminded you of a previous time you read this tale. Well, because I think the story wouldn't quite be as interesting if you don't put a lot of heart into it. Some stories, I think, stand well on their own and don't require a lot of passion. but this one, I think, absolutely does. Anyways, yes, that was The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. One of the few horror writers, evidently, to not have a two initial first name. After last stream, H.P. Lovecraft, M.R. James. Last stream was also very good. I encourage you. I really liked doing Count Magnus. It was definitely my favorite of the night. Do you hear the heart beating in the background and the ambient noise? I thought it would add quite a bit, even though it will be here for the entire evening. I do wish I'd had sound effects for that one queued up, because I think they'd work very well. But, you know, maybe I'll do a retry another night at that one. Oh. Thank you. I'm so glad you all enjoyed. This one is a lot longer. Like a lot longer. I'm not going to lie. Sorry. Just checking something very quick. Perfect. Oh, that actually took longer than I thought it would already. This is going to be The Body Snatcher. I'm less familiar with this one. I didn't get quite as much time to prep it as I did the other one. So I hope you all still enjoy. My heart can't take it. Evidently neither could either character within the Telltale Heart. Ooh, get yourselves comfy. If you have tea, have a tea. If you're trying to mimic the campfire vibes, pull out some marshmallows. Maybe enjoy a s'more. Or some popcorn. I saw Shade Sable, you have some delicious popcorn. Or it's just the emoji. Who knows? But yes, pull yourselves up and get ready for the tale of The Body Snatcher by Robert Louis Stevenson. One more drink of water before I go. Have to make sure I'm in proper condition. I'm having so much fun with this horror thing. I really do want to continue to tell stories, but outside of Halloween, I have a whole book of these tales. If you guys want some samples. Actually, before I go, I want to kind of put out feelers, since we have a lot of people in chat right now. Or at least a decent amount. Of some potential future ones I'd like to read. I'd like to read The Pit and the Pendulum by Edgar Allan Poe. One Summer Night by Ambrose Bierce. For the Blood is the Life by F. Marion Crawford. The Willows by Algernon Blackwood. That one is long. That would be a stream unto itself, and even then that would run quite long. And, of course, one of my favorites, The Yellow Wallpaper, and The Red Mask of Death, and maybe In the Penal Colony by Franz Kafka in the future. Maybe. Oh, and The Tomb by H.P. Lovecraft would also be quite fun. Fantastic. I hope that muted correctly. I had quite the cough. Yes to all. Well, then we have quite a few streams in the future for us, don't we? But yes, I also do want to read... Ooh, The Cask... I've read The Cask of Amontillado. I love that one. And what was the other one? The one about the painting. I think maybe it was Bluebeard. I don't know. It's been some time since I've read it. Maybe that is The Cask. Who knows? Either way, right now I'm currently working through a book I purchased that I've been enjoying quite greatly. So, for now I'll be sticking to tales from that book. if that's all right. And in the future, I'd like to do, like I said, maybe some romance stories on stream and some thriller and some comedy. You know, all that kind of stuff. Now, as I'm very known for at this point, I swear it's becoming one of my defining character traits is getting distracted as I'm just about to start saying something. Without further ado, The Body Snatcher by Robert Louis Stevenson. Every night in the year, 4 of us sat in the small parlor of the George at Debenham, the undertaker and the landlord, and Fetz and myself. Sometimes there would be more, but blow high, blow low, come rain or snow or frost, we 4 would each be planted in his own particular armchair. Fetz was an old drunken Scotsman, a man of education, obviously, and a man of some property, since he lived in idleness. He'd come to Debenham years ago, while still young, and by mere continuance of living had grown to be an adopted townsman. His blue camlet cloak was a local antiquity, like the church spire. His place in the parlor at the George, his absence from church, his old crapulous, disreputable vices were all things, of course, in Debenham. He had some vague, radical opinions and some fleeting infidelities, which he would now and again set forth and emphasize with tottering slaps upon the table. He drank rum, 5 glasses, regularly, every evening, and for the greater portion of his nightly visit to the George, sat with his glass in hand in a state of melancholy, alcoholic saturation. We called him the doctor, for he was supposed to have some special knowledge of medicine, and had been known upon a pinch to set a fracture or reduce a dislocation. But beyond those slight particulars, we had no knowledge of his character and antecedents. One dark winter night, it had struck 9, some time before the landlord joined us. There was a sick man in the George. A great neighboring proprietor suddenly struck down with apoplexy on his way to Parliament. And the great man's still greater London doctor had been telegraphed to his bedside. It was the first time that such a thing had happened in Debenham, for the railway was newly opened, and we were all proportionately moved by the occurrence. He's come. Oh wait, my apologies. He's come, said the landlord, after he filled and lighted his pipe. He, said I. Who? Not the doctor. Himself, replied our host. What's his name? Dr. McFarlane, said the landlord. Betts was far thoroughly through his 3rd tumbler, stupidly fuddled, now nodding over, now staring mazily around him. But at the last word he seemed to awaken and repeated the name, McFarlane, twice. Quietly enough the first time, but with sudden emotion at the second. Yes, said the landlord. That's his name. Dr. Wolfe McFarlane. Betts became instantly sober. His eyes awoke. His voice became clear, loud, and steady. His language forcible and earnest. We were all startled by the transformation, as if a man had arisen from the dead. I beg your pardon, he said. I am afraid I have not been paying much attention to your talk. Who is this Wolfe McFarlane? And then, when he had heard the landlord out, Cannot be. It cannot be, he added. And yet, I would like well to see him face to face. Do you know him, doctor? Asked the undertaker with a gasp. God forbid, was the reply. And yet, the name is a strange one. It were too much to fancy, too. Tell me, landlord, is he old? "Well," said the host, "he is not a young man, to be sure, and his hair is white, but he looks younger than you. He is older, though. Years older. But," with a slap on the table, "it's the rum, you see, in my face. Rum and sin. This man perhaps may have an easy conscience and a good digestion. Conscience, hear me speak. You would think I was some good, old, decent Christian, would you not? But no, not I. I never canted. Voltaire might have canted if he stood in my shoes, but the brains..." With a rattling Philip on his bald head, "The brains were clear and active, and I saw and made no deductions." If you know this doctor," I ventured to remark, after a somewhat awful pause, "I should gather that you not share the landlord's good opinion." Betts paid no regard to me. "Yes," he said with sudden derision. "I must see him face to face." There was another pause, and then the door was closed rather sharply on the first floor, and a step was heard upon the stair. "That's the doctor!" cried the landlord. "Look sharp, you can catch him." It was but 2 steps from the small parlor to the door of that old George inn. The wide oak staircase landed almost in the street. There was room for a Turkey rug, and nothing more between the threshold and the last round of the descent. But this little space was everything. Was every evening brightly lit up, not only by the light upon the stairs and the great signal lamp below the sign, but by the warm radiance of the bar-room window. The George thus brightly advised itself to passers-by in the cold street. Fetz walked steadily to the spot, and we, who were hanging behind, beheld the 2 men greet, as one of them phrased it, face to face. Dr. McFarlane was alert and vigorous, his white hair set off his pale and placid, though energetic countenance. He was dressed in the finest of broadcloth and the whitest of linen, with a great gold watch chain and the studs and spectacles of the same precious metals. He wore a broad folded tie, white and speckled with lilac, and he carried on his arm a comfortable driving coat of fur. There was no doubt that he became his years, breathing as he did of wealth and consideration. It was a surprising contrast to see our parlor sought, bald, dirty, pimpled, and robbed of his old Camelot cloak, confront him at the bottom of the stairs. "McFarlane!" he said somewhat loudly, more like a herald than a friend. The doctor pulled up, short on the 4th step, as though the familiarity of the address had surprised and somewhat shocked his dignity. "Toddy McFarlane," repeated Fetz. The London man almost staggered. He stared for the swiftest of seconds at the man before him, glanced behind him with a sort of scare, and then in a startled whisper, "Fetz, you?" "I," said the other. "Me? Did you think I was dead too? We are not so easy shut of our acquaintance." "Hush, hush," exclaimed the doctor. "Hush, hush. This meeting is so unexpected. I could see you unmanned. I hardly knew you, I confess at first, but I am overjoyed to have this opportunity. For the present it must be, how do you do, and goodbye in one, for my fly is waiting, and I must not fail the train. But you shall, let me see. Yes, you shall give me your address, and you can count on early news of me. We must do something for you, Fetz. I fear you are out at elbows, but we must see that for Auld Lang Syne at once we sang at suppers." "Money," cried Fetz. "Money from you. The money I had from you is lying where I cast it in the rain." Dr. McFarlane had talked himself into some measure of superiority and confidence, but the uncommon energy of this refusal cast him back into his first confusion. A horribly ugly look came and went across the almost venerable countenance. "My dear fellow," he said, "be it as you please. My last thought is to offend you. I would intrude on none. I will leave you my address. However, I do not wish it. I do not wish to know the roof that shelters you," interrupted the other. "I heard your name, and I feared it might be you. I wish to know if, after all, there were a God. I know now that there is one, that there is none. Be gone!" He stood in the middle of the rug, between the stair and doorway, and the great London physician, in order to escape, would be forced to step to one side. It was plain that he hesitated before the thought of this humiliation. White as he was, there was a dangerous glitter in his spectacles, but while he still paused, uncertain, he became aware that the driver of his fly was peering in from the street at this unusual scene, and caught a glimpse at the same time of our little body from the parlor, huddled by the corner of the bar. The presence of so many witnesses decided him at once to flee. He crouched together, brushing on his waistcoat, and made a dart like a serpent striking to the door. But his tribulation was not entirely at an end, for even as he was pressing, Fetz clutched him by the arm, and these words came in a whisper and a painfully distinct, "Have you seen it again?" The great, rich London doctor cried out with a sharp, throttling cry. He dashed his questioner across the open space, with his hands over his head, fled out the door like a detected thief. Before it had occurred to one of us to make a movement, the fly was already rattling towards the station. The scene was over like a dream. The dream had left proofs and traces of its passage. Next day, the servant found the fine gold spectacles broken on the threshold, and that very night we were all standing, breathless, by the barroom window, and Fetz at our side, sober, pale, and resolute in look. "God protect us, Mr. Fetz," said the landlord, coming first into possession of his customary sense. What in the universe is all this? These are strange things you have been saying." Fetz turned towards us. He looked each of us in succession in the face. "See if you can hold your tongues," said he. "That man McFarlane is not safe to cross, and those that have already done so have repented it too late." And then, without so much as finishing his third glass, far less waiting for the other two, he bade us goodbye, and went forth under the lamp of the hotel into the black night. We turned our places in the parlor, with the big red fire and 4 clear candles, as we recapitulated what had passed. The first chill of our surprise soon changed into a glow of curiosity. We sat late. It was the latest session I have known in the Old George. Each man, before we parted, had his theory that he was bound to prove, and none of us any nearer business in this world than to track out the past of our condemned companion, and surprise the secret he had shared with the great London doctor. It is no great boast, but I believe I was a better hand at warming out the story than either of my 2 fellows at the George, and perhaps there is now no other man alive who could narrate you the following foul and unnatural events. In his young days, Fetz studied medicine at the School of Edinburgh. He had a talent of a kind, a talent that picks up swiftly what it hears and readily retails it for his own. He worked little at home, but he was civil, attentive, and intelligent in the presence of his masters. They soon picked him out as a lad who listened closely and remembered well, nay, strange as it seemed to me when I first heard it, he was in those days well favored, and pleased by his exterior. There was, at that period, a certain extramural teacher of anatomy, whom I shall here designate by the letter K. He was subsequently too well known. The man who bore it skulked through the streets of Edinburgh in disguise, and while the mob that applauded the execution of Burke called loudly for the blood of his employer, but Mr. K was then at the top of his vogue. He enjoyed a popularity due partly to his own talents and address, partly to the incapacity of his rival, the university professor. The students, at least, swore by his name, and Fetz believed him himself, and was believed by the others to have laid the foundations of success when he acquired the favor of this meteorically famous man. Mr. K was a bon vivant, as well as an accomplished teacher. He, like a sly illusion no less than a careful He liked a sly illusion no less than a careful preparation. In both capacities, Fetz enjoyed and deserved his notice, and by the second year of his attendance, he held the half-regular position of second demonstrator or sub-assistant in his class. In this capacity, the charge of the theater and lecture room devolved particularly upon his shoulders. He had to answer for the cleanliness of the premises and the conduct of the other students. It was part of his duty to supply, receive, and divide the various subjects. It was with a view to this at that time very delicate affair that he was lodged by Mr. K in the same wind and at the same building, with the dissecting rooms. Here, after a night of turbulent pleasures, his hand still tottering, his sight still misty and confused, he would be called out of bed by the black hours before the winter dawn, by the unclean and desperate interlopers who supplied the table. He would open the door to these men, since infamous throughout the land. He would help them with their tragic burden, pay them their sordid price, and remain alone when they were gone, the unfriendly relics of humanity. From such a scene he would return to snatch another hour or two of slumber, to repair the abuses of the night, and refresh him for the labors of the day. Few lads could have been more insensible to the impression of a life thus passed along the ensigns of morality. His mind was closed against all general considerations. He was incapable of interest in the fate and fortunes of another, the slave of his own desires and low ambitions. Cold light and selfish in the last resort, he had that modicum of prudence, miscalculated morality, which keeps a man from inconvenient drunkenness or punishable theft. He coveted, besides, a measure of consideration from his masters and his fellow pupils. He had no desire to fail conspicuously in the external parts of life. Thus, he made it his pleasure to gain some distinction in his studies, and day after day rendered unimpeachable eye service to his employer, Mr. K. For his day of work, he indemnified himself by nights of roaring blackguard enjoyment, and when that balance had been struck, the organ that he called his conscience declared itself content. My apologies. The supply of subjects was a continual trouble to him, as well as to his master. In that large and busy class, the raw materials of anatomists kept perpetually running out, and the business, thusly rendered necessary, was not only unpleasant in itself, but threatened dangerous consequences to all who were concerned. It was the policy of Mr. K to ask no questions in his dealing with the trade. They bring the body, and we pay the price, he used to say, dwelling on the alliteration, quid pro quo. And again, and somewhat profanely, ask no questions. He would tell his assistants, for conscience sake. There was no understanding that the subjects were provided by the crime of murder. Had that idea been broached to him in words, he would have recoiled in horror. The lightness of his speech upon so grave a matter was in itself an offense against good manners, and the temptation to the men with whom he dealt. Fetz, for instance, had often remarked to himself upon the singular freshness of the bodies. He had been struck again and again by the hang-dog, abominable looks of the ruffians who came to him before the dawn. Putting things together clearly in his private thoughts, he perhaps attributed a meaning too immoral and too categorical to the unguarded counsels of his master. He understood his duty, in short, to have three branches: to take what was brought, to pay the price, and to avert his eye from the evidence of any crime. One November morning, this policy of silence was put sharply to the test. He had been awake all night with a raking toothache, pacing his room like a caged beast, or throwing himself in fury upon the bed, and had fallen at last into that profound, uneasy slumber that so often follows on a night of pain, when he was awakened by a third or fourth angry repetition of the concerted signal. There was a thin, bright moonshine. It was bitter, cold, windy, and frosty. The town had not yet awakened, but an indefinable stir already precluded the noise and business of the day. The ghouls had come later than usual, and they seemed more than unusually eager to be gone. Fetz, sick with sleep, lighted them upstairs, heard their grumbling Irish voices through a dream, and as they stripped the sack from their sad merchandise, he leaned, dozing with his shoulder propped against the wall. He had to shake himself to find the men their money. As he did, his eyes lighted on the dead face. He started, took 2 steps nearer with candle raised. "God Almighty!" he cried. "That is Jane Galbraith!" The men answered nothing, but they shuffled nearer to the door. "I know her, I tell you," he continued. "She was alive and hearty yesterday. It is impossible she can be dead. It is impossible. You should have gotten this body fairly." "Sure, sir, you're mistaken entirely," said one of the men, but the other looked Fetz darkly in his eyes and demanded the money on the spot. It was impossible to misconceive the threat or to exaggerate the danger. The lad's heart failed him. He stammered some excuses, counted the sum, and saw his hateful visitors depart. No sooner were they gone than he hastened to confirm his doubts. By a dozen unquestionable marks, he identified the girl he had jested with the day before. He saw with horror the marks upon her body that might well betoken violence. A panic seized him, and then he took refuge in the room. There he reflected at length over the discovery that he had made. Considered soberly at the bearing of Mr. K, the... Sorry, give me a sec. I need a light drink. Refreshing. Thank you all for your patience. There, he reflected at length over the discovery he had made. Considered soberly the bearing of Mr. K's instructions and the danger to himself of interference in so serious a business. And at last, in sore perplexity, determined to wait for the advice of his immediate superior, the class assistant. This was a young doctor, Wolf McFarlane, a high favorite among all the reckless students, clever, dissipated, and unscrupulous to the last degree. He had traveled and studied abroad. His manners were agreeable and a little forward. He was an authority on the stage, skillful on the ice or the links with skate or golf clubs. He dressed with nice audacity, and to put the finishing touch upon his glory, he kept a gig and a strong, trotting horse. With Fetz, he was on terms of intimacy. Indeed, their relative positions called for some community of life. When subjects were scarce, the pair would drive far into the country in McFarlane's gig and visit and desecrate some lonely graveyard, and return before dawn with their booty to the door of the dissecting room. On that particular morning, McFarlane arrived somewhat earlier than his wont. Betts heard him and met him on the stairs, told him his story, and showed him the cause of his alarm. McFarlane examined the marks on her body. Yes. Yes, he said with a nod. It looks fishy. Well, what should I do? Asked Fetz. Do? Repeated the other. Do you want to do anything? Least said soonest mended, I should say. Someone else might recognize her, objected Fetz. She was well known as the Castle Rock. We'll hope not, said McFarlane. And if anybody does, well, you don't, you see, and there's an end. The fact is, this has been going on too long. Store up the mud, and you'll get Kay into the most unholy trouble. You'll be in a shocking box yourself, so will I, if you come to that. I should like to know how any of us would look, or what the devil we should have to say for ourselves in any Christian witness box. For me, you know, there is one thing certain, that practically speaking, all of our subjects have been murdered. McFarlane! Cried Fetz. Come now, sneered the other. As if you hadn't suspected it yourself. Suspecting is one thing, and proof is another. Yes, I know. And I'm sorry, as you are, this should have come here. Tapping the body with his cane. The next best thing for me is not to recognize it. And, he added coolly, I don't. You may, if you please. I don't dictate. But I think a man of the world would do as I do, and I may add that I fancy this is what Kay would look for at our hands. The question is, why did he choose two for his assistants? And I answer because he didn't want old wives. This was the tone of all others to affect the mind of a lad like Fetz. He agreed to imitate McFarlane. The body of the unfortunate girl was duly dissected, and no one remarked or appeared to recognize her. One afternoon, when his day's work was over, Fetch dropped into the popular tavern and found McFarlane sitting with a stranger. This was a small man, very pale and dark, with coal black eyes. The cut of his features gave a promise of intellect and refinement, which was but feebly realized in his manners. For he proved upon nearer in acquaintance, coarse, vulgar, and stupid. He exercised, however, remarkable control over McFarlane, issued orders like the great Bassaw, became inflamed at the least discussion or delay, and commented rudely on the servility with which he was obeyed. Apologies, light delay there. This most offensive person took a fancy to Fetz on the spot, plied him with drinks, and honored him with unusual confidences of his past career. And if a tenth part of what he confessed were true, he was a very loathsome rogue, and the lad's vanity was tricked by the attention of so experienced a man. I'm a pretty bad fellow myself, the stranger remarked. But McFarlane is the boy. Toddy McFarlane. I called him. Toddy, order your friend another glass. Or it might be Toddy. Or it might be... Toddy, you jump up and shut the door. Toddy hates me. He said again. Oh yes, Toddy, you do. Don't you call him that confounded name. Sorry, actually. Incorrect. Don't you call me that confounded name, growled McFarlane. Hear him? Did you ever see the lads play knife? He would like to do that all over my body, remarked the stranger. We medicals have a better way than that, said Fetz. When we dislike a dear friend of ours, we dissect him. McFarlane looked up sharply, as though this jest were scarcely to his mind. The afternoon passed. Gray, for that was the stranger's name, invited Fetz to join them at dinner, ordered a feast so sumptuous that the tavern was thrown into commotion, and when that was all done, commanded McFarlane to settle the bill. It was late before they separated. The man Gray was incapably drunk. McFarlane, sobered by his fury, chewed the cud of money he had been forced to squander, and the slights he had been obliged to swallow. Fetz, with various liquors in his hand, returned home with devious footsteps, and a mind entirely in abeyance. Next day, McFarlane was absent from the class, and Fetz smiled to himself as he imagined him still squirming the intolerable Gray from tavern to tavern. As soon as the hour of liberty struck, he posted from place to place in quest of his last night's companions. He could find them, however, nowhere, so returned early to his room, went to bed, and slept. The sleep of the just. At 4 a.m, he was awakened by the well-known signal descending from the door. He was filled with astonishment to find McFarlane with his gig, and in that gig, one of those long, ghastly packages with which he was so well acquainted. What? He cried. Have you been out alone? How did you manage? But McFarlane silenced him roughly, bidding him turn to business. When they had got the body upstairs and laid it on the table, McFarlane at first, as if he were going McFarlane made at first as if he were going away. Then he paused and seemed to hesitate. And then, you had better look at the face, he said in tones of constraint. You had better, he repeated as Fetz stared at him in wonder. But where? And how? And when did you come by it? Cried the other. Look at the face, was the only answer. Fetz was staggered. Strange doubts assailed him. He looked from the young doctor to the body, then back again. At last, with a start, he did as he was bidden. He had almost expected the sight that met his eyes, and yet the shock was cruel. To see, fixed in the rigidity of death, naked on that coarse layer of sackcloth, was the man whom he had left, well clad and full of meat and sin, upon the threshold of the tavern. Awoke, even in the thoughtless Fetz, some of the terrors of conscience. It was a clash TB which re-echoed in his soul. That, to whom he had known, should have come to lie upon these icy tables. Yet these were only secondary thoughts. His first concern regarded Wolf. Unprepared for a challenge so momentous, he knew not how to look upon his comrade in the face. He durst not meet his eye, and neither words nor voice at his command. It was McFarlane himself who made the first advance. He came up quietly behind and laid his hand gently but firmly on the other's shoulders. "Richardson," said he, "may have the head." Now Richardson was a student who had been long anxious for that portion of a human subject to discuss. There was no answer, and the murderer resumed. "Talking of business, you must pay me. Your accounts, you see, must tally." Etz found a voice, the ghost of his own. "Pay you!" he cried. "Pay you for that!" "Why, yes, of course you must. By all means, and on every possible account, you must," returned the other. "I dare not give it for nothing. You dare not take it for nothing. It would compromise us both. This is another case like Jane Galbraith's. The more things are wrong, the more we must act as if all were right. Where does old K keep his money?" "There," answered Fetz hoarsely, pointing to a cupboard in the corner. "Give me the key, then," said the other, calmly holding out his hand. There was an instant hesitation, and the die was cast. McFarlane could not suppress a nervous twitch, the infinitesimal mark of immense relief, as he felt the key between his fingers. He opened the cupboard, brought out pen and ink and a paper book that stood in one compartment, and separated from the funds in a drawer a sum suitable to the occasion. "Now look here," he said. "There is indeed payment made. First proof of your good faith. First step to your security. You have now to cleanse it by the second, and to the second payment in your book. And then, for your part, may defy the devil." The next few seconds were for Fetz an agony of thought, but in balancing his terrors, it was the most immediate that triumphed. Any future difficulty seemed almost welcome, if he could avoid a present quarrel with McFarlane. He set down the candle, which he had been carrying all this time, and with a steady hand entered the date, the nature, and the amount of the transaction. "And now," said McFarlane, "it is only fair that you should pocket the lucre. I've had my share already. And the by, when a man of this world falls into a bit of luck, has a few shillings extra in his pocket. I'm ashamed to speak of it, but there's a rule conduct in this case. No treating, no purchase of expensive class book, no squaring of old debts. Borrowers don't lend." "McFarlane," began Fetz, still somewhat hoarsely, "I've put my neck in a halter to oblige you." "To oblige me?" cried Wolf. "Oh, come. You did as near as I can see the matter what you downright had to do in self-defense. Suppose I got myself in trouble. Where would you be? This second little matter flows clearly from the first. Mr. Gray is the continuation of Miss Galbraith. You can't begin and then stop. If you begin, you must keep on beginning. That is the truth. No rest for the wicked." A horrible sense of blackness and the treachery of fate seized upon the soul of the unhappy student. "My God," he cried, "what have I done? And when did I begin? To be made a class assistant in the name of reason, where's the harm in that? Service wanted the position. Service might have gotten it. Would he be where I am now?" "My dear fellow," said McFarlane, "what a boy you are. What harm has come to you? What harm has come to if you hold your tongue? Why, man, do you know what this life is? There are two squads of us, the lions and the lambs. If you're a lamb, you'll come to lie upon these tables, like Gray or Jane Galbraith. If you're a lion, you'll live and drive a horse like me, like Kay, like all the world with any wit or courage. You're staggered at the first, but look at Kay. My dear fellow, you're clever. You have pluck. I like you, and Kay likes you. You were born to lead the hunt, and I tell you, on my honor and my experience of life, 3 days from now, you'll laugh at all these scarecrows like a high school boy at a farce. And with that, McFarlane took his departure and drove up the wind. In his gig to get under the cover before daylight, Fetz was thus left alone with his regrets. He saw the miserable peril with which he stood involved. He saw, with inexpressible dismay, that there was no limit to his weakness, and that, from concession to concern, he had fallen from the arbiter of McFarlane's destiny. To his paid and helpless accomplice, he would have given the world to have been a little braver at the time, but it did not occur to him that he might still be brave. The secret of Jane Galbraith in the accursed entry in the daybook closed his mouth. Hours passed. The class began to arrive. The members of the unhappy Grey were dealt. The members of the unhappy Grey were dealt out to one and to another, and received without remark. Richardson was made happy with the head, and before the closing hours of freedom rang, Fetch trembled with exultation to perceive how far they had already gone toward safety. For 2 days he continued to watch with increasing joy the dreadful process of disguise. Give me just a sec. I need a lot more water. My throat is just going through it. Thank you all for your patience as I drink. On the third day, McFarlane made his appearance. He had been ill, he said, but he made up for lost time by the energy with which he directed the students. To Richardson, in particular, he extended the most valuable assistance and advice, and that student, encouraged by the praise of the demonstrator, burned high with ambitious hopes and saw the medal already within his grasp. Before the week was out, McFarlane's prophecy had been fulfilled. Fetz had outlived his terrors and forgotten his baseness. He began to plume himself upon his courage. He had arranged the story so that in his mind, that he could look back on these events with an unhealthy pride of his accomplishment. He saw but little. They met, of course, in the business of class. They received their orders together from Mr. K. At times they had a word or two in private, and McFarlane was from the first to last particularly kind and jovial, but it was plain that he avoided any reference to their common secret. And when Fetz whispered to him that he had cast in his lot with the lions and forsworn the lambs, he signed to him, only smiling to hold his peace. At length, an occasion arose which threw the pair once more into a closer union. Mr. K was once again short of subjects. Pupils were eager, and it was a part of the teacher's pretensions to be always well supplied. At the same time, there came news. My apologies, I lost myself in the story. Yes. I'll just start here. At length, an occasion arose which threw the pair once more into a closer union. Mr. K was again short of pupils. So short of subject. Pupils were eager, and it was part of a teacher's pretensions to always be well supplied. At the same time, there came news of a burial in the rustic graveyard of Glencourse. Time has little changed the place in question. It stood then, as now, upon a crossroad, out of call of human habitations, and buried fathom deep in the foliage of 6 cedar trees. The cries of the sheep upon the neighboring hills, the streamlets upon either hand, one loudly singing among pebbles, the other dripping furtively from pond to pond, the stir of the wind in the mountains of old flowering chestnuts. And once in 7 days, the voice of the bell and the old tunes of the precentor were the only sounds that disturbed the silence around the rural church. The Resurrection Man, to use a byname of this period, was not to be deterred by any of the sanctities of customary piety. It was part of his trade to despise and desecrate the scrolls and trumpets of old tombs, the paths worn by feet of worshippers and mourners, and the offerings and the inscriptions of bereaved affection. To rustic neighborhoods where love is more than commonly tenacious, and where some bond of blood or fellowship unite the entire society of a parish, the body snatcher, far from being repelled by natural respect, was attracted to the ease and safety of the task that had been laid. Oh, sorry. Skipped a page. Give me a sec. It seems I've lost myself once again. My deepest apologies. There we go. Was attracted to the ease and safety of the task. To bodies that had been laid in the earth in joyful expectation of a far different awakening, there came that hasty, lamp-lit, terror-haunted resurrection of the spade and mattock. The coffin was forced, the cements torn, and the melancholy relics clad in sackcloth after being rattled for hours on moonless byways, were at length exposed to utmost indignities before a class of gaping boys. Somewhat as 2 vultures may swoop upon a dying lamb, Betts and MacFarlane were to be let loose upon a grave, in that green and quiet resting place. The wife of a farmer, a woman who had lived for 60 years, had been known for nothing but good butter and godly conversation, was to be rooted from her grave at midnight, carried, dead and naked, to that faraway city that she had always honored with her Sunday best. The place beside her family was to be emptied till the crack of doom, her innocent and almost venerable members to be exposed to that last curiosity of the anatomist. Oops. Late one afternoon, the pair set forth, well wrapped in cloaks and furnished with a formidable bottle. It rained without remission, a cold, dense, lashing rain. Now and again blew a puff of wind, but these sheets of falling water kept it down, bottle and all. It was a sad and silent drive, as far as the Pennaculloch, where they were to spend the evening. They stopped once to hide their implements in a thick brush not far from the churchyard, and once again at the fisher's tryst to have a toast before the kitchen fire, and vary their nips of whiskey with a glass of ale. When they reached their journey's end, the gig was housed, the horse was fed and comforted, and the 2 doctors, in a private room, sat down to the best dinner and best wine the house afforded. The lights, the fire, the beating rain on the window was cold, incongruous work that lay before them, added zest to their enjoyment of the meal. With every glass, their cordiality increased. Soon McFarlane handed a little pile of gold to his companion. A compliment. A compliment, he said. Between friends, these little D accommodations ought to fly like pipe lights. Betts pocketed the money and applauded the sentiment to the echo. "You are a philosopher," he cried. "I was an ass till I knew you. You and Kay. Between you and the Lord Harry, you'll make a man of me." "Of course we shall. A man, I tell you. It required a man to back me up the other morning. There are some big, brawling, 40-year-old cowards who would have turned sick at the look of the D thing. Not you. You kept your head. I watched you." "Well, and why not?" Fetz thus vaunted himself. "It was no affair of mine. There was nothing to gain on one side of the disturbance, and on the other, I could count on your gratitude. Don't you see?" He slapped his pocket till the gold pieces rang. McFarlane somehow felt a certain touch of alarm at the unpleasant words. He may have regretted that he had taught his young companion so successfully, but he had no time to interfere, for the other noiselessly continued in this boastful strain. "The great thing is not to be afraid. Now, between you and me, I don't want to hang. But that's practical for all, can't?" Oh, oops. Sorry, I was reading this wrong. "The great thing is not to be afraid. Now, between you and me, I don't want to hang. But that's practical for all, can't? McFarlane, I was born with a contempt. Hell, God, devil, right, wrong, sin, crime, and all the old galley of curiosities. They may frighten boys, but men of the world like you and me despise them. Here's to the memory of Grey." It was by this time growing somewhat late. The gig, according to order, was brought round the door with both lamps brightly shining, and the young man had to pay their bills and take to the road. They announced that they were bound for Peebles and drove in that direction till they were clear of the last houses of the town. Then, extinguishing the lamps, returned upon their course and followed a by-road towards Glencourse. There was no sound, that of their own passage, and the incessant strident pouring of the rain. It was pitch dark here, and there was a white gate, or white stone, in the wall guided them for a short space across the night, but for the most part it was at foot pace, and almost groping that they picked their way through the resonant blackness of their solemn, isolated destination. In the sunken woods that traversed the neighborhood of the burying ground, the last glimmer failed them, and it became necessary to kindle a match and re-illuminate one of the lanterns under the gig. Thus, under the dripping trees, environed by huge and moving shadows, they reached the scene of their unhallowed labors. They were both experienced in such affairs, and powerful with the spade, and they had scarce been 20 minutes at their task before they were rewarded by a dull rattle on the coffin lid. At the same moment, McFarlane, having hurt his hand upon the stone, flung it carelessly above his head. The grave in which they now stood, almost to the shoulders, was close to the edge of the plateau of the graveyard, and the gig lamp had been propped, the better to illuminate their labors, against a tree, and on the immediate verge of a steep bank descending to the stream. Chance had taken a sure aim with the stone. Then came the clang of broken glass. Night fell upon them. Sounds, alternately dull and ringing, announced the bounding of the lantern down the bank, and its occasional collision with the trees. A stone or two, which it had dislodged in its descent, rattled behind it into the profundities of the glen, and then the silence like night resumed its sway, and they might bend their hearing to its utmost pitch, but naught was to be heard except the rain, now marching to the winds, now steadily falling over miles of open country. They were so nearly at the end of their abhorred task that they judged it wisest to complete it in the dark. The coffin was exhumed and broken open, and the body inserted in the dripping sack and carried between them to the gig. One mounted to keep it in its place, and the other, taking the horse by the mouth, groped along the wall and brush until they reached the wider road by Fisher's Tryst. Gonna take a quick drink. Here was a faint, diffused radiancy, which they hailed like daylight. By that they pushed the horse to a good pace and began to rattle merrily in the direction of the town. They had both been wetted to the skin during their operations, and now, as the gig jumped along the deep ruts, the thing that stood propped between them fell now upon one and upon the other. And at every repetition of this horrid contact, each instinctively repelled it with the greater haste, and the process, natural although it was, began to tell upon the nerves of the companions. McFarlane made some ill-favored jest about the farmer's wife, but it came hollowly from his lips and was allowed to drop in silence. Still their unnatural burden bumped from side to side, and now the head would be laid, as in confidence, upon their shoulders, and now the drenching sackcloth would flap icily about their faces. A creeping chill began to possess the soul of Betts. He peered at the bundle. It seemed somehow larger than at first. All over the countryside and from every degree of distance, the farm dogs accompanied their passage with tragic ululations, and it grew and grew upon his mind that some unnatural miracle had been accomplished, that some nameless change had befallen the dead body, and that it was in fear of their unholy burden that the dogs were howling. "For God's sake," he said, making great effort to arrive at speech, "for God's sake, let it have a light!" Seemingly, McFarlane was unaffected in the same direction, for though, as he made no reply, he stopped the horse, passed the reins to his companion, got down, and proceeded to rekindle the remaining lamp. They had by that time got no further than the crossroad to Auchenclinny. The rain still poured as though deluge were returning, and it was no easy matter to light in a world of wet and darkness. When at last the flickering blue flame had been transferred to the wick and began to expand and clarify and shed a wide circle of misty brightness around the gig, it became possible for the two men to see each other and the thing they had along with them. The rain had molded the rough sacking the outlines of the body underneath. The head was distinct from the trunk, and the shoulders plainly modeled. Something at once spectral and human riveted their eyes upon the ghastly comrade of their drive. For some time, McFarlane stood motionless, holding the lamp. A nameless dread was swath, like a wet sheet, about the body and tightened the white skin upon the face of Fetz. A fear that was meaningless, a horror of what could not be, kept mounting in his brain, and another beat of the watch he had spoken, but his comrade forestalled him. "That is not a woman," said McFarlane in a hushed voice. "It was a woman when we put her in," whispered Fetz. "Hold that lamp," said the other. "I must see her face." And as Fetz took the lamp, his companion untied the fastening of the sack and drew down the cover from the head. The light fell very clearly upon the dark, well-molded features and smoothly shaven cheeks of a too familiar countenance, often beheld in dreams of both of these young men. A wild yell rang into the night. Each leaped from his own side into the roadway. The lamp broke, fell, and was extinguished, and the horse, terrified by this unusual commotion, bounded and went off towards Edinburgh in a gallop, bearing along with it the sole occupant of the gig, the body of the long dead and long dissected Grey. And that was the tale of the Body Snatchers. I do wish I'd made more of a plan for it. In general, but it was a longer story, and I struggled to sort of write my version of the script. Oh, I'm glad it was still enjoyable. I felt like mayhaps the first story was better. I want to record audiobooks. It's actually one of my sort of dream jobs. I think it would be really fun, and like, I like it. I like the thought of it. Thank you, Toxic. I'm so glad you stayed. Thank you, Shade Sable as well. Oh, and thank you, Chaos GMT, if you're still here as well. I like the good, just simple and to the point. Yes. I try to time the story to the background ambience as best I can. Oh, I'm so glad. I was like, after the first story happened, I was like, well, damn. Oh, sorry, Bald Megamind Ren. You are a tat. You are very late. Sadly, I just finished the last story of the night. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We read the Telltale Heart as well as the Body Snatchers, and I do encourage to go back to the VOD, as it were, at least for the Telltale Heart. I was very proud of that one, and I hope to do more shorter ones because they're kind of my favorite to do. They're easier to plan. Like The Outsider was a lot of fun. I did enjoy the Count Magnus like quite a bit. Oh, I can't wait for the next one. This and Minecraft are genuinely my favorite streams. Partially because I just get to sort of talk a lot and I don't have to wait for any game story. Oh, I'm so glad you all enjoyed. I might make a clip of the Telltale Heart, especially because it was quite short and I think it could do quite well. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was actually so excited for you to be here today. Oh, okay. Good night. Good night, Psycho. I'm glad you stayed. Thank you so much for staying. Oh, Toxic. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Good night, Psycho. Good night. Anyways. I always say way too much. You wouldn't think, but is actually not one of my isms in real life. It was trained out of me pretty hard. It sort of just comes up on stream. Not sure why. Yes, good night. Good night. Well, we've been out at the fire for a long time. I'm sure you're all getting very cold. The heat is dying down, and it might be— oh, god damn it, I totally forgot to do this. Oh, I had this all ready. I was all excited. Wait, before I leave the fire, I have to show you all this. Look at that. Look at it. It looks so much better. It's like the light of the fire is like shining on me. Oh, I should have set that up. Yes, my lovely spectators do make my heart beat. Mayhaps the next time we do the tale of the Telltale Heart, I'll have to put a microphone up to my chest so you can all hear how fast my heart beats for you. Yes, doesn't it look good? Doesn't it look great? Oh, I can't believe I forgot this. Next time. Anyways, with that, we might wish to depart back to my room. Let's see how fast we get there. Wow, that was really fast. Oh my god, that was fast even for me. Like sometimes, you know, time just works differently here. But that was shockingly quick. I entertain myself. Yes, please like, I guess I should actually be that. I need to do that. Hello everyone, please like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit that bell icon. Oh, it feels weird to say that. I don't know if I like saying it, but I know it's like a good habit to have, even though it's not necessarily my style. Honestly, like, please don't feel pressured to like subscribe or do any of that. Like, if you enjoy my channel and you enjoy my content, stick around. If you are the type of person who likes to subscribe, please do. It means a lot to me. But if you're not the type of person, if you just don't like subscribing to people, like, you don't have to. I'll still love you all the same. Sometimes my streams are much earlier, I swear to God. And only like if you genuinely liked it. It does help me out. So, you know, if you want me to be helped, that's once again up to you. That sounds like pressure. I've gotten into this whole thing about it. But anyways, I've been waiting 2 hours to talk about how good the early seasons of The Simpsons are and how much heart and how much solid writing that show had. I have been waiting to bring this up again because we had to get onto the scary stories. But yes, though it was a damn good show back in the day. Like a damn good show. I still will rewatch the classic episodes. And even a little bit into season 10 and 11, because there's still some solid moments there. But once again, if you do like the later Simpsons, like, this is only my opinion and my taste. Yes, I'm horrible when it comes to talking about media. If you could, most people could bring up almost anything, as long as I've seen it, and I will talk endlessly about it. I have an entire rant about the Twilight Zone, like, prepared for you all. A list of my favorite episodes, why they're my favorite episodes. And if you haven't watched The Simpsons in years, I do genuinely recommend it. Like, the old ones are so good. But I need to start wrapping up. Yes. It was so nice to have you all here. It actually was an amazing night. I'm so glad. I do want to say in future scary story or any story reading streams, you're absolutely welcome to talk in chat, to react. It's not distracting for me, and it gives me something to say during my water breaks, something to do. Because this isn't like an official audiobook recording. It's not like an official audiobook recording. It is a stream, and I do like interacting with you guys. I like talking to you. That is probably the thing I dislike most about these types of reading streams, is I don't get to really talk to you guys. So maybe we'll find a nice middle ground. I don't know. I don't know. You got none. Don't know what that means. Anyways, I would like to find maybe a middle ground, but I don't know. Is it better if I just read? Is that better than with the pauses and the light breaks? Because sometimes I feel like just word after word after word. Especially with our last story, I was not as confident in that. Okay. Then mayhaps we can stick with the current format. I might just have to bring tea. My voice was starting to get a little hoarse. Things to consider. Either way, we'll be doing another scary story reading. Probably a lot. I want to do ones on like leading up to Halloween too, and not Halloween as well. I absolutely want to do ones leading up to Halloween, and I'm probably going to do some after. I know it's not quite the vibes anymore, but I do still enjoy it. So we'll probably keep doing them. Yes, absolutely. That sounds like a great plan. As well as, like I said, romance and other genres in the future. I'm very excited for. Maybe some classic tales. Maybe some poetry. I say this every stream. I have to make a lot of plans. If anyone has anything they would like me to read on stream, the picture of Dorian Gray I saw in chat a while back, and I do believe that's a full novel. Yes, it is. It is, I do believe, a full novel. Let me just do a quick check. Yeah, 224 pages. So, that one might not be one I can do. Same with that story that was written, that stole my likeness, The Invisible Man. I would like to read that on stream. But once again, oh, really? People want long reads. Well, I saw Romeo's friend Teddy, the mad doctor, who everyone should check out, by the way. Read the fanfic Reika sent you. I did read it, first of all, Toxic. Spicy. It's incredibly spicy. Loved it. But I need more fanfic if I'm going to read them on stream. I can't just read one. Read me the Odyssey. Yes, it's a spicy piece of fanfic. And I want to read more fanfic on stream. About any members of Yokast, really. And all I need is more to do it. All I need is enough content to actually be able to make a stream out of it, and you'll get it. I will dramatic read. I will do impressions of my fellow Yokast members. Poor ones that are in horrible taste and are quite mean, but I will do them. No, I just want to make fun of how you all talk instead. And that is one thing I deeply want to do. So yes, if you would like your fanfic read, write it. Stories sent by spectators. Like officially published stories? I would like to... Oh, yes, I did see Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I haven't read that in some time, but it is quite long. And I don't think it falls well into the short story category. I do prefer to read short stories because just keeping track of all the voices live on air can be quite difficult. It's not exactly my forte. There I go saying again. Reading longer stories would be quite difficult for that reason. Reading stories sent by spectators. Absolutely, if you mean like anything published or fanfics relating to Yokast. Either one of those are things that I would absolutely love to, read on stream. At school. Okay, bye, Bald Makermind Ren. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you check out the VOD later. Like I said, at least try to check out the Telltale Heart. I think you'd like it a lot. And I'm just wrapping up anyways. Yes, please send me fanfics and things you want read. Please do. It would mean a lot to me because I'm always looking for new ideas. Okay. That's a good note to go out on. Thank you all for coming. It was a absolute delight to have you all here. Oh, there I go again. It's such a horrible habit. It was an absolute delight to see you all tonight. And I can't wait until I see you again.